After making a farewell speech outside Downing Street, Boris left London to travel to Scotland and tender his resignation to Queen Elizabeth. The speech was full of bomb-bursting jokes, characteristic of a man once loved by much of British public, but also loathed by many.
Well, this is it, folks. Thank you, everybody, for coming out so early this morning. In only a couple of hours, I will be in Balmoral to see Her Majesty the Queen. And the torch will finally be passed to a new Conservative leader. The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. And through that lacquered black door, a new Prime Minister will shortly go to meet a fantastic group of public servants.
Johnson, who fought to stay in the office until the end, used his departure speech to boast of his successes, including an early vaccine program during the pandemic and his early support for Ukraine in its battle against Russia.
Above all, thanks to you, the British people, to the voters for giving me the chance to serve, all of you who worked so tirelessly together to beat COVID, to put us where we are today. Together, we have laid foundations that will stand the test of time, whether by taking back control of our laws or putting in vital new infrastructure. Great, solid masonry on which we will continue to build together, paving the path of prosperity now and for future generations. And I will be supporting Liz Truss and the new government every step of the way. Thank you all very much. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you.
Right, let's unpack all of this with Dr. Dale Mckinley, an independent writer, researcher and lecturer, as well as political activist. A very good evening to you, Dale. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I mean, as you heard, various issues raised there from our reports. I'd like to start with foreign policy. Obviously, the war on Ukraine, the issues of leadership and the direction there were raised, but the great deal of dependency on imported gas and the fast weakening currency, that will be a problem for Britain's inflation. How do you expect the new UK Prime Minister to deal with this?
Well, obviously, the UK, along with many other European countries, are scrambling right now. They're scrambling to lessen their dependencies on Russian energy and gas in particular, and to try to find new avenues. And this is an interesting aspect of the potential relationships with not only South Africa, but the rest of our continent, because our continent basically is the new frontier, potentially for gas exploration, as we've seen in Mozambique, in Cabo Delgado, as we've seen off our own coasts. So I expect that what the UK and what Liz Truss will be doing is they'll be seeking out new partnerships, new agreements, not only with countries in our continent and potentially South Africa itself, but with any other country that can, who they can find politically palatable and who can lessen that dependency. They're also obviously going to adopt a range of different domestic policies, subsidies, assistance with energy prices, tax cuts, these kinds of domestic sort of monetary and fiscal policies that would lessen the impact of the massive rise in energy prices that they've experienced. But for us, in terms of the foreign policy, I think it's going to be an interesting terrain, precisely because there's a complete reset, not only of the UK, but the Europeans' relationships with Russia and the energy dependency.
And I'd like to talk about it broadly, but also just to narrow it down a bit. You mentioned South Africa. Do you expect any major foreign policy changes there? And I'm saying this against the backdrop of the fact that the pound has already fallen around 8% against the dollar in the last 3 months alone. So a slightly worse performance than the euro, making imports of energy priced in dollars even dearer. But what is the picture for the UK? And just in terms of trade relations with South Africa and the African continent, do we expect more protectionism in this light?
Well, I don't think there's going to be a major change. I mean, if you remember, Liz Truss was Foreign Secretary under Boris Johnson, and she was also Trade Secretary before that. So the kinds of policies that we've had over the last several years, I think we can expect a fairly consistent continuation of those kinds of policies. Where I think we're going to see a little bit of a difference is in more aggressive postures from the British government to the new British government with bilateral trade relationships. They're going to be seeking that they need to boost the UK economy. They need to find new avenues, simply also because of Brexit, because of the damage that's been done to their relationships with Europe and the trade relationships in particular. They're going to be seeking new markets. They're going to be seeking new avenues. And so I would expect that what you'll find is you'll find a bit more of an aggressive foreign policy, not on the military and sort of material front, but on the trade front, particularly to try to increase exports of British exports, and also to basically make sure that the relationships with a country like South Africa, and mineral resources and other kinds of things that are crucial to the British economy, are provided in a fair and equitable manner, at least for the British on their side. So I think that in that case, not necessarily protectionism, but a more aggressive assertion of British foreign policy in the continent and with South Africa to say, we can be a partner, you can rely on us, you can't rely on Russia and China, for example. And I think that's the flip side of the coin, which is that Liz Truss and the Conservatives are very anti-Russian and anti-Chinese in relation, and they're going to try to pull South Africa in particular in their sphere.
I mean, that should be an interesting scene to see play out, given the current geopolitics. South Africa, a member of BRICS, but the UK having its own problems to deal with. You mentioned Brexit. That has also resulted in a tight labour market. Official data shows that 49,000 fewer EU-born workers in Britain than in mid-2019, while the number of people listed as inactive because of long-term sickness rose to a 19-year high of 2.39 million in June. That's up by 300,000 since the pandemic. So how is she going to tackle that amidst all of these challenges that we're speaking about?
Well, the one thing that the Brits need above all is also labor. Their shortage, they have a massive shortage of certain labor skills in their country, precisely because of the Brexit, and many of the other European workers left. So what a trend that has already been very apparent over the last many years is South African professionals, particularly healthcare professionals, tech professionals, other teachers and others. You could see a potentially more aggressive posture being taken to try to pull in more of those professionals into the labor market of the UK, not just from here and from other parts of the continent, but from internationally as well. They're going to have to find new labor markets, so to speak, other than the European Union. And I think that's the way they're going to deal, or at least try to deal, with the shortage that you mentioned in relation to the labor market in the UK.
So she has already hinted at what's on her agenda. She's made it very clear, the issue of tax cuts and spending stimulus. What are your thoughts on what she's already laid out?
Well, I'm one of those that would ideologically be on the other side of the fence. I mean, Liz Truss is a declared Thatcherite. That was her heroine, was Margaret Thatcher. She is what some would call an economic libertarian. She believes in less government, tax cuts, letting the free market do its job, basically giving the wealthy the trickle-down economics, the kinds of neoliberal policies that we have experienced here in our own country and globally. So I think that's what we can expect more of, although I think she's going to come up against a realistic sort of wall of expectation of the British public. Britain has never been in so many economic and social problems as it is now. And so I don't think that the same old policies, the Boris Johnson, the ex-Thatcherites, and others are going to cut it in the UK. And I think she's going to be forced into several compromises in relation to more state involvement, more welfare, more national health care, for example, and other and educational policies that she would ideologically be opposed to, but which are going to be necessary for her to maintain political support. And let's remember, the next general elections in the UK are in early 2025, which is just over 2 years away. So I don't think she's going to be in a position to adopt major fundamental shifts and new ideological pushes, given the fact that she's going to want the Conservatives to remain fairly popular and at least to have a chance of winning the next elections as well.
So can she expect some sort of support from the Bank of England in the form of rate cuts? I mean, the BOE also plans to start selling some of its bonds that it bought since the global financial crisis of 2007 to 2008, but that's another form of monetary policy tightening.
Sure. Look, I mean, the Reserve Bank of the UK, like the Federal Reserve in the United States and others, is a fairly conservative and they move very slowly. I think we can expect some more moves to lessen, to basically, while they're trying to keep inflation in control, but to stimulate the economy through more incentives, through other tax cuts and other kinds of things like that. But I don't see the Reserve Bank of the UK nor these other reserve banks fundamentally grasping the nettle, which is fundamentally that in these economic times, we need a public sector that drives job creation, that drives a renewal of small-scale businesses, that is able to basically rescue people from socioeconomic distress. And I don't think Liz Truss and the Conservatives are equipped to do that. And I don't think the Reserve Bank is equipped to do that, nor do they want to do it, precisely because their agenda is not really on the side of the majority of the Britons, as we've seen with regards to the increased poverty levels, the increased desperation. And they have never shown themselves to have that kind of more, I would say, caring attitude towards the electorate. So I think that in spite of themselves, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot economically and policy-wise, unless they have some kind of road to Damascus ideological shift, which I seriously doubt would be the case.